What up? Welcome to Homegrown Hustle, where local brilliance takes the center stage. I'm your host, Matt Eichmann. Together, we're about to embark on an inspiring journey. Our community thrives on the wisdom of insightful leaders that are right here in our backyard. And we're bringing their expertise to your ears. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or simply seeking inspiration, this podcast is your guide. Join us every week in celebrating innovation, guidance, and the power to inspire greatness. Let's explore the stories that shape our local business landscape, and together, let's ignite the spark of excellence.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Homegrown Hustle Podcast. I'm here with Mr. Mike Fisher, one of the owners over at Premier Commercial Properties, also a broker and running the property management division over there. In his past life, he's got a degree from St. Cloud. He served as a Naval air crewman and a helicopter rescue swimmer. I'm just picturing Ashton Kutcher as I'm saying this out loud. So, Mike, thank you so much for coming in here. Let's talk a little bit about like the Naval air crewman side of things. Was it like the movie or?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. You got the Hollywood side of it, right? When I was coming out of high school, I had no clue what I wanted to do, right? And I saw the movie The Guardian. And I was like, oh, that looks sweet. And, growing up, Top Gun, favorite movie, watched The Guardian. I was like, oh, how do I do that, right? And I went to the recruiting center and the Coast Guard door was locked. Then the next door was the Air Force. That guy was in there in a meeting. Then the next one was the Navy, and the Navy was like, hey, come on in here. So I went in and talked with them and, kind of tell them about who I am, what I'm looking to do. And, of course, they're like, oh, you want to be a SEAL? I was like, well, no, not really. That sounds like, the odds aren't really my favor to make that, right?
I've seen the Discovery Channel show.
Exactly. Like, I've seen all the stuff on it. Like, I don't think I can do that. And then he's like, well, what about rescue swimmer, right? I was like, oh, okay. Tell me a little bit more about that. And essentially they were like, well, you get to wear a flight suit, jump out of the helicopter. I was like, well, okay. I mean, I'm 17, right? So they're saying all these fun things, throwing a bunch of money in my face. And I'm like, okay, where do I sign? So when I was 17, right before my senior year of high school, I was at the recruiting center, signing on the dotted line. And then my parents had to come in and sign because I was underage. And that kind of set my path there right after high school graduation. I knew where and what I was doing.
So you're a professional swimmer, kind of.
Well, I wouldn't say professional. I'm above average.
Above average. Did you swim before, or they just have some type of program that turns you into Michael Phelps with gear on?
Yeah, no, I swam in high school my junior and senior year. Swam the freestyle, the 50, the 100, and some of the relays. And, it was all right. I think my 100 was right around a minute. I mean, nothing fabulous. It was pretty average swim times. And, I love being in the water. And when I was in 10th grade, I got my scuba license. So, I've always kind of been a water guy.
Why'd you get your scuba license?
I was just, talking to my mom. I was like, this looks cool. And again, watching Discovery Channel, watching people go and diving. And I was like, well, Mom, this looks cool. So she's like, well, do you and your sister want to go try it? Well, sure. So we went and took a scuba diving course. And we went out and got certified as scuba divers. So it was pretty cool.
Sweet. Okay. All right. So we're going to get back to this. That's a pretty amazing story just to start off, and we're just getting going, people. So let's talk about Premier Commercial Properties. Second generation, right? You're part owner. You've got some other partners there with you. So tell us a little bit about the history of the business.
Yeah. So my, growing up, didn't really know what my dad did. And my mom was working at Honeywell, and my dad was doing generator sales with Cummins or Caterpillar, one of them. I was before I was even in kindergarten. So my dad was doing the traveling sales. My mom was working, and, my mom kind of realized, Dad's always gone. Like, we got to try to change this up. And my mom didn't like kind of working, doing the whole working at Honeywell, doing customer service, and then coming home at night and not really spending time with the family, right? So she decided that she was going to leave Honeywell and be at home, a stay-at-home mom with the kids while I was in kindergarten and my brother preschool and my sister just started in elementary. And my dad was kind of sick of doing the traveling sales as well. So he decided to try a whole new endeavor and got into real estate. So he started with Remax selling houses, and in his first year, he was selling houses, but was like, I don't like this. It's too much. It's too personal in a way, right? People are looking at these houses like, oh,
all emotions.
It's all emotions, and my dad is not very emotional, so for him that was kind of tough dealing with these people who are, want to buy the perfect home for their family, right? And I don't blame them. They want to set that perfect stage for their family and their future, right? But it wasn't what my dad really enjoyed doing, right? He was much more a numbers guy. And so he met with Rod Lee, who was the other part owner of Premier at Remax, and they decided to make their own commercial company. Right then, Premier Commercial Properties was born. My dad and Rod both left Remax and started the company back in 2001. And, again, 2001, I'm in 4th grade. I don't really know what it is. And, all through then, my dad doing real estate deals and, started buying his own properties. And, things were going real well up until the crash in 2008. My dad had quite a few properties. He owned the Blaine Medical Center. He had Spectators Bar and Grill. He had a lot of different retail stuff going. And, thankfully, we got to live a pretty awesome lifestyle. My dad was always at my baseball games growing up. He was, assistant coach. That was great. I mean, he had all this extra income to kind of be there for me and my family and my brother and sister, supporting us in our after school activities or whatever we were doing. And, that was awesome. And, we also had a house in Florida at the time. We'd go down and spend a lot of time there. It was great. I had a great childhood. And then 2008 happened, and, unfortunately the banks,
your world was shook probably.
It flipped upside down. Went from getting, school lunches to, I need to start bringing my own lunches from home. Right.
So do you remember like how you were feeling or like what your thought processes were at that point, or were you too young to?
No, I mean, I realized what was going on. And at the time my mom was like, all right, well, we got to instill some financial literacy for our kids. Right. So my mom went and got a job at the school district being after school para. And my dad was still just working real estate, trying to sort out his stuff. And, with that, we were cleaning some of my dad's buildings, earning a little income on the side, helping him out. And my mom was using that as a way to like teach us how to manage money. And so at this point, if I wanted to do sports or whatever, I had to pay for sports. If I wanted to go play football, I had to pay for it out of my own pocket. And how was I doing that? Well, I had to figure out how I was going to make money. So I got a job at Festival Baking Groceries, and then I was cleaning my dad's office for extra money. And that's how I paid for school clothes, if I was doing sports or anything. So, and that was the same thing for my brother and my sister. And so my mom taught us early about managing money. If you want to go buy that new PlayStation, well, you're paying for it.
That's a financial degree. That's a lot of wisdom on your mother's part.
Oh, it was great. I mean, I can't tell you how much that's put me ahead.
How did you feel through that?
I didn't like it,
Like, I mean, going from like, I don't know, like being ignorant maybe to how successful your dad was and what type of life that was creating, and now like,
oh, I was spoiled. My whole family was spoiled. Absolutely. So it changed. And but my mom teaching us financial literacy and all that, I mean, that really kind of helped me where I'm at now. And kind of one of the other things my mom did is when we were babies, she opened up credit cards in our name. And so if you look at my credit history, I'm 33 years old with 33 years of credit.
You have the best.
And it's, whenever I've been applying for a loan for a car or a house, everyone's looking at like, you have this much credit? Well, yeah. And, for me, it's always been there, right? I'm like, does no one else do this? You're like,
I've never heard anybody say that before.
Yeah. So, and again, it was just, my mom using my social, my sister's social, my brother's social to open a credit card with a $500 max limit on it. So if anything happened, like got stolen or whatever, it wasn't going to be running amok, right? And so, over time, I got a car. I applied for my own credit cards. I got accepted because I've already got history on it. And, thanks to my mom, I've got this great credit history, and, she also taught me about investing in the stocks and all that. So she really kind of put me on the whole financial path.
Like it wasn't just a conversation that you had and like, here's your lesson, Mike. It was like that's like a immersion into financial literacy.
Oh, absolutely. My mom got me, my brother, and sister checkbooks for our savings accounts, and she showed us how to write checks, when I was in middle school and high school. And it was just like, oh, okay, well, I know how to write a check. This is
cool.
That's cool, right? Like no one else I know knows how to write a check, right? But it was cool because I started realizing, like, working at festival, like, okay, I'm working here, making money, I'm paying for sports, I'm really kind of being my own thing, right? And I had to learn how to manage money. If I was going to play football that fall, well, I had to save up my money and then, essentially quit at festival so I could go play football or work with management to figure out a schedule that I could keep working there and like only buy groceries or whatever it was on Sunday or Saturday.
For yourself.
Exactly. So it taught me how to speak up for myself, manage a schedule, and communicate with adults or other people.
That's the type of stuff that's like really important in life.
Absolutely.
It's like all that stuff.
Basic stuff that you don't really learn in high school or even the education system, right? So, that was huge for me, and it's, helped me kind of get to where I'm at today now.
That's awesome, man.
Managing money throughout the Navy, and you see everyone else go out and blow their whole paychecks at the bar or whatever, and I was like, well, no, I wasn't doing that. So it was weird when everyone's like, oh, I'm broke. It's like, what do you mean you're broke? Like how do you have you not been saving?
You don't have
anything?
a budget? Like, yeah. That's all right. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that, like, either you went into to serve because like that was like part of some type of conversation like that, or you didn't really know what you wanted to do, and it was kind of just, I don't want to do commercial real estate. I'm going to go over here and do this.
Yeah. So, growing up, I was kind of ignorant as to what my dad did, right? I just knew that he worked with buildings, and every time we drove around, I saw his signs outside of buildings. Oh, okay, cool. There's Dad's name again, right?
Yeah.
And, getting into my junior year and or my junior summer in high school, I was trying to figure out, all right, what do I want to do? What am I interested in, right? And at the time, I was going to PSEO at Anoka Ramsey, so I was going and getting college done while I was in high school and getting it paid for by the government as part of just going to school, right? So I was already starting to accumulate some college credits. And, I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. And so I started looking at schools, and, I wasn't looking for the right reasons. I was looking at what the guy-girl ratios were, and my head was
the obvious things to look at first.
Exactly, right? My head was not really in the academics. And I remember touring St. John's, and I was just like, Mom, I just don't see myself here. And she's like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, I think I want to go enlist. And she's like, well, do you sure you don't want to try college? Try it out for a year, see what it's like. And I was like, well, maybe I'll apply to the Naval Academy, right? See if I even get in over there. And so I applied, I got denied. And I was like, well, do I go to college? Maybe try the ROTC program. But I was like, no, I really don't want to hang around. I want to go out and start my own adventure, right? And so I signed up with the Navy, and they said, well, here's what you can do. And I was like, well, sign me up. Where do I sign? Right. So
just right on the spot, just like that.
Well, you have to go.
Obviously, your parents had to come in.
Yeah, my parents had to come in, but I'm kind of just condensing the story on it. But essentially, you go there.
I'm just trying to figure out how fast the decision was made in your mind. Like, did you go back and like sit on it and mull it over, or as they were talking, were you like, "Yep"?
I think I thought about it for like 2 days. Okay. Because I went and met with the recruiter and told my mom, I was like, "Hey, I'm meeting with this recruiter," and she's like, "Oh, okay. Well, as ever concerned mom, like, I don't like that, And so I went and met with him, and he was talking about all these different jobs, talking about his stories, and I was like, it sounds like adventure, right? Like, I'm gonna go do something. And again, this was still in the height of the global war on terrorism, right? We still had soldiers over in Afghanistan and Iraq, and there's still a height of that. And I was just like, well, yeah, let's go fight for America, right? But, again, my mind wasn't on like the SEAL teams or the bomb techs or anything like that. I was like, I think I can swim. Like, this sounds cool, right?
I'd still get to jump out of a helicopter. Like, that's
So, I went to MEPS, which is where you go and essentially sign up.
Okay.
You sign on the dotted line there, you take your oath, and you officially get a contract. And so I had my contract all set. I knew essentially after my senior summer, I was going to ship out. And that's what happened.
And then was it a 6-year contract?
It was. Yep.
Okay.
So all contracts are 8 years, whether it's 4 or 6 years of active duty, then there's an inactive duty part of it. So it all depends on what your contract was. And mine was considered a special program because the training for it is about 2 years through the pipeline. So, the government wants to get their time out of you, right? So they were like, if I'm going to spend 2 years training you, I want to get 4 years of time out of it, right? So that's how it ended up being a 6-year contract.
How many guys and gals were like in your? Is it a class?
Yeah. So kind of how it works is you go to boot camp and you get paired up with, your group that's going to be going through the classes with you. So in boot camp, we had some like 80 guys in our division. Okay. Some guys were going to go try out for the SEAL teams or go to BUDS. Other guys were going to go EOD, which is explosive ordnance disposal. Other guys are going to go diver and then SWIC and then the rescue swimmers. So you go through boot camp, and then after boot camp, we left down to Pensacola, down in Pensacola for air crew school, rescue swimmer school, and A school and all that. And that's where you start to see some people get washed out of the program. So we started with a class of 30 and ended up graduating like the original probably 15 or 16.
Oh, wow.
And then from there went on to A school. And then from there, you go either to Norfolk or San Diego. And while you're going through this whole process, you're just, watching some guys quit or some guys just couldn't pass the test and they either get rolled or get, essentially kicked out of the program.
How, I don't know if you could recall, but how many of them was it like the mental side of things? They couldn't get past it and they just quit versus just physically couldn't.
There's probably about 5 that, just
bailed.
Quit. Physically just couldn't.
2 years is a long time.
Do it. Yeah. I mean, it was a grind, and then others just couldn't pass the test, whether it was the escapes and releases or going through, the mock rescue scenario, right? And they got rolled to the next class, or if they failed too many times, you're just dropped from the program. Dude. And, it was just like, oh.
It's like a nightmare of 2 years for me. I sink in the water, straight. I'm not a good swimmer at all. How many times have you drowned? I've drowned a bunch. Not bad, but
you've inhaled your fair share of water.
I'm trying to get out of the water quickly,
Oh yeah, and if you watch the movie The Guardian, it's very Hollywoodized, right? Some of the stuff happens to us, or what they do there happens in the at rescue swimmer school, but there's a lot of Hollywood in that too. And then from there, we went on to A school, and then at that point they either send you to be an anti-submarine hunter, which is anti-submarine warfare, where you're essentially dropping sonar buoys and you're hunting for subs. That's one route.
What?
The other route is search and rescue, and it's just needs of the Navy.
I didn't know submarine hunter was even a thing.
Yeah. So I didn't get that route, and so some of the guys went that way, and they were flying in the back of Romeo. So it's a helicopter that's got a big old radar dome on the side of it. It shoots out these sonar buoys, and they just ping, and you listen for sonar, and you're tracking things under the water.
This is so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then the other route is search and rescue. So that's where you go into the Sierra, which is the kind of like the Army's version of the Black Hawk, just painted gray, folds in half, has a hoist on the side. It's really the only difference. Yeah. And so I got the Sierra route, went to Norfolk to learn how to fly in the back. And then from there, spent 6 months just learning how to fly in the back of the H-60. And, you're out there and you're just like, oh, this is cool. Flying in the back of a helicopter, doors open. And, then they start taking through the whole process of how do you pre-flight the helicopter? How do you look for issues, right? And, what goes into running this big machine?
You ever fly a helicopter?
No, I was in the back. So the pilots are up front flying it.
I didn't know if everyone rotated through positions.
Yeah, it's
this is your spot.
Exactly. It's here, you're the monkey in the back right here, right? So it's an officer that flies up front, and then we operate in the back. And part of it is you get to jump out and then shooting crew-served weapons as well. So the 50 cal or the 7.62 machine gun being shot out of the helicopter as well. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then once I was done with that, I went up to Maine for SEER school, which is where they, it's like Boy Scouts on steroids, right? They kind of show you escape, evasion, because the job is essentially operating in the enemy's backyard, so you got a chance of being captured. So again, they take you through a whole training scenario of if you get captured, what's it going to be like? And
crazy.
Oh yeah, like I said, it's Boy Scouts on steroids, and just kind of feel like you get your butt kicked for a week, just getting slapped around and all that. So it's a lot of fun, but looking back is like, oh, it sucked. You're just sitting there going through the woods and evading, crawling through mud, and it's like, oh, this sucks.
All right, so was there like lessons around like the mental side of how hard that job was the whole time, or did like the mental side of like continuing to go through all that, like did you just have to gather all that yourself?
I mean, we weren't really talking to a psychologist or anything like that.
Okay.
If you felt overwhelmed or whatever, you certainly could request to go talk to someone, but
it wasn't like, here, this is part of the lesson. Like,
no, it was just kind of like, all right, I got that check in the box. I made it through that school. Made it through that school. All right, now we're heading to Maine to go learn this thing, right?
Did you ever almost quit at any point?
Oh yeah, there were tons of times I wanted to quit, and I was like, oh, I should have just gone to college. Like,
why didn't you?
Well, again, I didn't feel like I was going to be successful in college, and that's why.
Why didn't you quit?
I just probably ego, right? Like everyone back here knew I was leaving. I was like, I can't go home a quitter. Like if I show back home, no, I'm either going to make it or break it. So
you knew you had some more in the tank.
Yep. No, that or is too dumb to quit, right?
Yeah. Well,
so I was just...
I'm going to go more like the David Goggins route on this one.
Yeah, something like that. But, there were plenty of times I wanted to quit. I mean, when we were out in Maine, we were out at night evading, sleeping on the ground, and it was just a thunderstorm, just raining like mad on us. And I remember getting up middle of the night, taking my sleeping bag and just dumping it out. And I was like, all right, well, let's get back in this thing, And as you're sitting there, you're like, oh, college dorm sounds real good right now. Yeah. I'm freezing. I'm starving. I got guys chasing me. Like, this sucks.
Shooting at me, trying to catch me.
Yeah.
Dude,
it was by far the best training command I was at because, you were just learned what it was going to be like. And, they had guys that were chasing us through the woods. They didn't have any loaded guns or anything, but, the scenario felt pretty. And then once you get captured, they take you to the base, go through interrogation. It was like, oh, this sucks.
Is that a scenario like you're not actually going to get away? Like we're going to capture you
no matter what? Yeah, you're going to get captured no matter what.
Dang.
You're not going to outsmart those guys.
It's like, why am I even running?
Yeah, so once you make it to the safe point, right, then supposedly the guy is going to get you out, right? And I remember hopping in the trunk of this car, and we were going to go get past the checkpoint. Well, we didn't make it past the checkpoint, right? And I remember this guy opened the trunk, and he just reminded me of The Rock, just massive dude, picks me up, throws me out of the car, throws a bag over my head, and I'm like, oh gosh. Then I get back in this truck and then hauled off to
Did you think like, all right, we made it out?
Oh yeah, I had a glimmer of hope. I was like, we're gonna be okay here. Like maybe we got away with this. And all of a sudden, like you hear, the accents of the actors out there talking at the checkpoint. It's like, oh no, this ain't good. As soon as that trunk opened, I knew like crap, right? So got taken out of that and put through the whole interrogation
that's
thing.
Like a cool experience. Like, I don't know, maybe you don't know it, but you assume you're probably not going to die here. And like, I don't know a lot of other people that go through that. And
oh yeah, in the back of your mind, this is training, right? But it feels pretty real too, because you got guys talking accents, and at this point we hadn't eaten for like 3 days, right? So we were starving, we were tired because all we've been doing is evading through the woods. It's cold, it's wet. You're miserable, and your mind starts to play tricks on you. So in the back of my mind, you do know it's training, right?
But you're like hallucinating at that point, I would feel like.
Oh yeah, I remember. So I've never done drugs or anything like that, so I don't know what it's like to hallucinate. But I remember when I was in my cell, like, because they keep you awake, right? They want to just try to wear you down mentally. And I remember like looking down at the sand, and I was like, just hallucinating. I felt like I was watching rice grow out of the ground. It was the weirdest thing. And then all of a sudden this guy's pounding my door, yelling at me. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever.
There's rice over here, dude.
Yeah. It was the weirdest thing. And then they come take you out of your cell and they put you through a whole interrogation thing. And
but
then at the end they kind of coach you like, okay, this is where you screwed up.
should have done
you should have
this.
done this, or
But was there coaching prior to that too? Or
yeah, you spend a whole week of
Okay.
like just straight
this
kind
is
of
what
coaching.
you're gonna have to do. We're gonna
Yep.
catch your ass.
Yeah,
Like-
it's kind of crawl, walk, run, right?
Okay.
So you have the classroom portion where they teach you like this is what's going to happen. You watch it, you go through it, and then they critique you, right? And then all right, now we're going to go run, right? We're going out to the woods. We're going to show you this, all right? And then all of a sudden it's like game on. You're evading, and then you get captured, and now you're trying to use everything that you learned and try it out in this controlled environment.
I mean, that's cool, bro. Like we could talk about that.
Oh gosh, yeah, we
like
could-
stories like that. Like I could nerd out on forever. So okay, so you go through that. That was part of it.
Yep.
Was there like you graduated now?
Yeah, you
like,
get your little piece of paper certificate, and then it's like, all right, now you're
Yeah,
off to
bro.
your final duty station out in San Diego. And I was like, oh, great. So get out to San Diego. I check in with HSC4, my squadron, and they had just gotten back from deployment. And so all these guys are, a little salty because they've been on the ship for 9 months, and I'm the new guy showing up, and it's like, well, here's the new guy, right?
Yeah.
And so I check in there, start working through my qualification syllabus on being a Naval air crewman. And, then from there, passing flights, doing what I need to do to get all the checks in the boxes. And then at the end, you have like a big oral board where they just bombard you with questions. And then you do a check flight to make sure you're like, okay, like you are a competent crewman in the back. And, congratulations. Now here's your wings of gold. You got your, air crewman wings, and now you're a qualified crewman.
How did you feel at that moment?
Oh, it was great. It was like, I finally made it,
So, like that ego, were you like pounding your chest to all the homies that motivated you to not quit, or was it?
It wasn't much of an ego because even though I got qualified, I was still nothing, right? Because all these other guys in the shop had way more qualifications for me, The next thing for me was going to mountain flying school and then getting all these other checks in the boxes that I needed to. And, then we got to spend 2 summers in Hawaii, which was great,
Yes.
doing rim pack. And I mean, that was absolutely phenomenal. And then we were slated to deploy in 2014, but then there was a sequestration, which pretty much the Obama administration cut funding for the military at the time. So we just didn't have money to deploy. So instead of deploying, we hung around San Diego. Guys who were deployed just got extended. And so we didn't have money to really go do anything. So we were just hanging at home. And during that time, they're like, well, the SEAL teams, these guys still have their funding. So you're going to go help them with whatever qualifications they need. So I was like, well, okay, cool. So these guys would show up in our ready room and be like, all right, we need to go do some call for fires. We got to jump out of the helicopter. We got to do a fast rope insertion or rappel insertion. And I was like, cool, man.
Sweet, let's do it.
So we'd brief it, head out to El Centro, the range outside of San Diego. We'd go do whatever they needed to do, get the check in the box, and then just kind of go shooting stuff. They're like, we're gonna go call in some gun runs on these tanks out there. So we're gonna load up with the right ordnance, insert the guys, and then started calling in gun runs. So it was like, this is sweet, going out there, leaning out a helicopter with a 50 cal, just
Yeah, I don't know a lot of human
dumping
beings that have
rounds
done
in this
that.
target. It was cool.
That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Like less the swimming for me, but like the gun part for sure. So after that, like what's the trajectory like going into 2016 where
Yeah, so 2016, my contract's coming up, and I've gone back and forth on, do I stay and make a career out of this, or do I get out? And, at the time I was like, I'm missing out on a lot of stuff back home. I'm missing out on my sister's wedding. I'm missing out on birthdays. And it's just like, I'm looking at the other guys in the shop, and it's like, they're missing a lot of their family time too. And you can see it taking a toll. While I was in watching guys go through divorce because they're just gone.
Yeah.
The wives had enough of it. And I was like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be in that situation. And so I kind of made the decision I was getting out. While I was getting out, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad and some of these other financial books. And it was like all of a sudden the light clicked. Like, oh, this is what my dad does, right? My dad owns real estate, right?
yeah,
And it's like,
you're like,
oh.
wait a minute.
So all of a sudden this makes sense. Like, oh, and my dad's like, well, what are you going to do when you get out? I was like, well, I don't know. And he's like, well, why don't you come on and try real estate? Right. And I was like, yeah, I think I should. Cause after all the books I'm reading, all these people have made their wealth in real estate. Like you did real estate.
Yeah.
You're in real estate now, like light bulb moment. Duh. So I got out, moved back to Minnesota, went to St. Cloud State. got my 4-year degree in real estate and been working at Premier the entire time. So 2016, I came on, got my real estate license at Premier and started jumping into it with my dad. Dad took me under his wing, showing me everything. And he was like, let's start you out doing property management. You should just learn how a building works, which is phenomenal because, I'm green. I have no clue what I'm getting into. And so learning what goes into managing these buildings, coming up with budgets, dealing with repairs, all that.
Do you remember like your first day like at Premier, like learning that?
Oh, I was super excited. I mean, I got to work at like 6 a.m. before my dad was there. I was like, oh, hey, where is everyone, right? Like, I'm used to get up early.
I thought everyone's supposed to be here.
So I'm just like sitting there having coffee. I'm like, well, I don't even know how to really work my laptop and log in yet because I don't have an email yet from IT. So I'm just kind of sitting there.
But I'm super excited to be here,
right? So, my dad shows up and he's like, all right, well, this is what we're going to kind of do. You're going to kind of just follow me around today. Oh, okay, cool. So I followed him around. I followed Rich around, who is the other partner. That's Rod's son, and he's other part owner of Premier. And, seasoned commercial real estate guy. He's got his own properties. And so I'd follow him around on showings, follow my dad around.
So from a training standpoint, like what was put in place through all the training you had when you were serving in the Navy versus like learning at Premier?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you had everything outlined in the Navy, right?
Like
all this,
check.
right? And at Premier, it was not so much, right?
Yeah.
My dad was like, well, it's kind of just, you just got to jump into it and learn.
You'll
right?
get it. Just follow us around.
Just follow us around. And, so my dad's walking me through like some deals. I'm following him on showings, learn like these letter of intents. Like, well, what even is that? What is this purchase agreement, right? And I just remember being so intimidated. Like, there's like 35 pages here and I can pronounce like maybe half these words. Like, this is legal mumbo jumbo. And I'm like, I don't know. I didn't learn any of this in college, right? And so, kind of panicking, like, what did I get myself into? And, I was like, you know what, let's just open up the brain. Let's just absorb what we can and just ask a bunch of questions, right? So I just asked my dad questions on everything. And, all of a sudden, like, starting to get comfortable. And I remember going out doing my first deal, and my dad just kind of helped me along the whole thing. Like, all right, we'll draft up the letter of intent together. What did you guys talk about? Oh, this, right? Let's just fill in all these boxes here. And it was like, oh, okay. So now all of a sudden I'm getting the hang of it. I understand like what goes into this. And in the meantime, like how I was getting paid was managing the properties, right? Because my dad was managing property as well. So the other thing I learned is most real estate companies are a 3-part thing. You have property management, you have sales, and you have leasing. Those are the 3 components to just about all commercial real estate companies. The property management is what feeds the company to run, and also is leads for when those spaces become vacant, because now you have to refill them, right? So it's a way to constantly keep leasing. And then also if the landlord decides to sell, well, we manage the building. Hey, we're right here to help you sell it too, right? We know the building. So it's really a good like foot in the door to help you like figure out what, is going on at a building. Also the lead of like, well, if he's going to sell, like I'm already managing and leasing it, like more than likely he's going to use me to sell it too, right? So that was a huge thing that I kind of realized. I was like, well, Dad, I'm going to try to expand this portfolio. Like, I'm going to see if I can just get more properties to manage. And at the time, we were only managing like 9 properties. It was pretty small. And I started just networking, meeting with people. And I was like, yeah, here, we'll manage your building. I'll take it on. Because, at the time, I'm pretty green on the leasing and sales side. People are asking me questions like, well, what do you think this building sells for? I'm like,
oh, yeah, it's Pops.
Oh, I have no clue. Like, that's my dad.
Yeah.
And the other thing, like, I have a young face, right? Most people are looking at me like, you don't know anything. You're just a kid, right? So I was like, kind of battling that too. And I was like, you know what? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into the property management, really learn that side of things, understand what goes into a building so that when I talk to some of these people, I know exactly what's going on with most buildings and I can really provide value that way. So that's what I did. So my first couple of years, I really dug hard on managing property, learning what goes into a building. And then I was doing, sales and leasing on the side, again, learning underneath my dad. Right. And then it was like, all right, time to like spread the wings here and start doing sales and leasing on my own. Right. So doing more networking, kind of getting the hang of leasing, understanding the market of like what all goes into it. Right. And then the portfolio for real estate was getting pretty big for management. And I was like, I'm working like 12-hour days here managing sales and leasing and the management side. And I was like, oh, I'm getting kind of burnt out on this. You know, it's a lot because, I mean, you're babysitting buildings. You're taking those phone calls that landlords don't want to take, right? And you're dealing with the issues that are like, I never thought would be an issue, right? Like, for example, at one building, a gentleman in a restaurant coming out of an elevator dropped cheese down the elevator shaft. How the heck did you do that, right? Whole building stinks of cheese. So now I've got to get the elevator guys out there to open up the elevator. I got to get the restoration guys out there.
There's no playbook for this one.
No, not at all. And that's the one thing that was tough was in the Navy, like you had a checklist and a procedure for everything, right? Like out here, it's like, well, you're flying by the seat of your pants. Like there really is no checklist, right? So that was the big learning curve was, how do I do this?
Have you built those checklists over time to be able to continue to scale?
And now that I've got a property manager underneath me, because you know, I was telling my dad, I was like, I'm getting burnt out on this. And so we took on an intern for the summer. His name's John, great property manager, great guy, works very hard. And he just kind of learned from me, like, hey, what goes in the property management? So he followed me around on everything, showing him what's going on. And at the end of his intern, I was like, well, what do you think? He's like, oh, you know, I kind of like this. I was like, so do you? Job's yours if you want it. And he was like, yeah, you know, I want to do this. So we hired him on, and you know, he's starting to run things on his own, and you know, kind of give him the power of like, I'll let you make the decisions, man. You know, I'll back you up 100%. And you know, if there is an issue, you know, we'll fall forward on it, right? You know, I'm not gonna like cuss you out or do anything like that, right?
You're not getting fired.
Yeah, I mean, this is a learning curve. I was in your shoes, you know. I mean, there are some things where I wanted him to kind of struggle to learn about it. You know, for example, like calling an HVAC company out. Well, the HVAC guy wants to know who's going to pay him, right? So he's got John's info. Well, really, the lease says it's the tenant's info. So it's like, okay, I kind of know what's going on here. I bet you what's going to happen is the HVAC company is going to be calling John to get paid. And John's like, oh, you got to talk to this guy, right? And, you know, kind of a learning curve of like, one, you got to learn to read the lease, understand who's responsible for what. And two, you got to have the tenant make the phone call to get it sorted out, not you, because now they're going to be looking for you for payment, right? And I kind of saw this was going to happen. I was like, all right, I'm going to let them kind of struggle and learn from this, right? And I know the tenant, I know the landlord, the building, like I know this is going to be fine. So he kind of struggles a little bit, which was good because I wanted him to learn. And it was a great learning opportunity for him. And then he came to me, he's like, hey, I don't know what to do here. I'm like, all right, let's call the tenant, let's get him involved, and we got it sorted out. You know, vendor got paid, all taken care of. And I was like, so what did we learn here? He was like, I got to read these leases. I was like, you got to read the leases, and don't jump to a conclusion if you don't know it. Because right now we're overseeing 30 buildings. It's like, there's no way you have 300 leases memorized. It's just too much. So you know what's going on at most of the buildings, but don't ever, if you don't know, don't say something, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a good learning thing for him. And now he's doing real well. You know, if there's an issue, he's like, well, here, let me check the lease and I'll get back to you. And then from there, we can sort out what the issue is. Connect the vendor with the tenant, or if it is a landlord item, all right, Mr. Landlord, I got to get this guy out to get it fixed.
So you're like you get caught in between stuff sometimes. It sounds like you're a really good leader, though. Is that like from, like, did you learn that through your experience with the Navy and all that?
Yes. So when I was in the Navy, I had mentees underneath me. So my job was to ensure that they were getting qualified, and I was in charge of the training program at our squadron. So
you just breezed over that.
Oh, yeah, right. But, you know, my job was ensuring these guys were getting trained. And, you know, I felt like I did a pretty good job. I mean, all of my mentees, they were all passing. They were all passing their flights. They all knew the knowledge. And, you know, what we operate on is the NATOPS. It's this super huge manual that has every procedure, everything about the aircraft, and you're almost expected to have that whole thing memorized.
Oh, goodness.
And it's like, there's no way to fully memorize it. But what you do is you break it down into chunks, right? And kind of working with these guys, learn in different sections. Well, if I got to figure out what fuel this is, well, I know that's going to be in chapter 4, right? And it talks all about oils and everything. It was like, that's how you got to learn these things. And, you know, again, allowing some of those guys to fill forward, right? I remember going out there doing pre-flight, and it was like, all right, check the helicopter. Once you're done, I'm going to look it over. And, yep, good to go. I was like, you sure about that? And they're like, yeah, it's good. I was like, well, again, let's open our eyes here. I had your pre-flight the wrong bird. This one's missing a rotor, right?
Oh, wow.
I just wanted to see if you were going to catch that, right? Like, this isn't the helicopter we're flying when we're over in 614. 612 here's got a missing rotor, right? And it's one of those things. It's like, you get very focused on the small things, but you also got to remember to look at the bigger picture, right? Like, yeah, sure, these helicopters are great, but if it's missing a rotor, we're not going anywhere. So,
oh my gosh, I would feel not very good at my training if that happened to me.
It's not to be, a punch of the gut,
but it's
or
a
anything,
lesson,
right?
though. Yeah,
But it's
like,
again, we're learning forward and falling forward,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, yeah, you screwed up. Again, I did this on purpose. I had you pre-flight the wrong helicopter because I want to see if you're going to even notice this big mistake, right? Again, don't get so bogged down with the minor details that you miss the bigger picture. And so that's what I've been trying to instill with John and our office manager as well, is like, yes, the nitty-gritty details matter, but also don't forget about the big picture too, right? So that's kind of how I've been implementing things with my employees there. And then I kind of take that on myself, right? Like when I'm working through a purchase agreement with a building, like, hey, let's not get so caught up into this minor language. Like, let's look at the overall deal, right? Does this even make sense, right? I mean, just because this guy wants to buy a building, should he buy the building? Well, no. One, it's got to make sense on the numbers. It's got to appraise. It's got to be a cash value thing, right? I mean, if you're buying this thing and you're going to lose money every month, why are you doing this, right? And so my approach when I'm working with folks is educate. One, what do you want to buy? Are you an owner operator? Are you an investor? What do you want to do, right? And if they're an owner occupier, it's like, okay, well, we need to figure out how much square footage you need. You'd be surprised how many people come up to me and they're like, I want a medium space.
What does that even
I don't know. It's like, this isn't McDonald's or Starbucks. We ain't getting a medium size thing, right? I need to know square footage, right? And that's where it goes into the education piece. Like, okay, what's your business operate out of now? Are you in 1,000 square feet? Are you in 20,000 square feet? Like, what do you need, right? Get those details sorted out first, and then kind of educate and see where it goes from there. And again, it's the same thing on the leasing side. When folks are like, hey, I want to start up this company. Okay, have you ever done this before? No. Okay, well, most landlords don't like startups because they're risky. Do you have any experience in this? Oh, yeah, I used to work in an insurance agency. I want to go run my own now. Okay, well, it sounds like you got some experience into this. How big of an office are you looking for? Again, these guys don't really know square footages. Well, I think 1,000. Well, how many people do you have working for you? Oh, it's just me. A single office might be better because 1,000 square feet, you're going to have a lot of wasted square footage, unless you're storing it with other stuff.
So you walk. Yeah. First, you validate. Okay, is
kind of vet them, right? Like,
can this person actually
correct
get a building or a space? And there's some disqualifiers that are there, especially for the owner occupiers, right?
Yeah.
Is that the majority of new business that you're getting when somebody's kind of trying to get into real estate and they want to buy the building that their business is going to operate in? Or is it investors we want more buildings, or you have this building for sale? What's the trade-off there, I guess?
So kind of right now, I get a lot of these TikTok guys, right? Who are like, oh, I've seen this thing on TikTok or Instagram. I want to go buy a building, right? Just because I saw this guy post about it that's, making money. It's like, okay, well, again, you're just seeing a reel of someone who's successful. Who knows what really is behind the story? Let's break this down. How much money do you have, right? Let's even see what you're going to qualify for.
This is another disqualifier.
Exactly. If you're looking at buying this $1 million building and you only got $50,000 in the bank,
not going to do it.
Numbers don't make sense there, right? You're just not even get past that first level of financing. So we have to look at something smaller. And then it's like, is this even realistic? Am I going to find something that's going to be in this price point given what you're telling me? So that's, again, vet and try to educate that way. And then the other side for an owner occupier, right now there's a lot of generational turnover, right? So guys are either taking over their family businesses and they're either expanding or shrinking given the current market condition, right? And what industry they're in. And, they want to either cut rent or go get in their own building that's a multi-tenant and, be a owner occupier and also investor too. And so there it's like, all right, well, let's figure out how much square footage you're in. One, what's your business? Are you industrial? What's your power need? What's your clear height need? Do you need a dock, drive-in, outdoor storage? These are all big questions we got to sort out, because if we go look at property that's not even zoned that way, well, this isn't going to work. And then the next part is the city even going to allow for a conditional use permit? You know, a lot of guys on either YouTube or Instagram or whatever, like, oh yeah, you just apply for the CUP, conditional use permit, and it gets passed. Well, not always. Like there's a lot that goes into it too.
Depends
right?
what city you're in.
Exactly. You know, so again, it's all about educating folks and kind of telling them and understand their story too. You know, what do you want to do?
So, I mean, everything you've said, there's been so much of like this undertone of like education. Like, are there a few things that you could give it as far as advice goes to anybody who's listening and thinking about like commercial real estate and they don't have that experience?
Yeah, I think probably the best thing to do is like, you know, hop on LoopNet, see what's out there, right? Or look at some other websites and just see what property's selling at. And the other thing is, you know, I would encourage you reading, you know, Rich Dad, Poor Dad or some of the other financial books to kind of understand numbers, because that's how it all is going to come down to, is understanding like, is this property going to cash flow? And then from there is talking to a real estate expert like myself, or, you know, if you're working with someone else, ask them like, I see this building's vacant. Is this even a leasable building? If so, what's the lease rate at, right? And that's where we start putting together the numbers. Like, okay, you want to buy this, you know, 1,000 square foot retail building. Okay, well, you know, 1,000 square feet, what can you do with this, right? Well, not a whole lot, but maybe you could do more with this 10,000 square footer, right? All based on whatever they want to do, right? I'm just kind of using numbers as examples,
Gotcha.
right? So if I want to be an owner occupier of my own retail, well, given your own building, you know, you've got banking options like a SBA loan. Well, at that point, you got to get 51% of the building to qualify for SBA. Does your business get there? Can we get there, right? And then kind of understanding what will go into that. Right now, there's a lot of restaurants that are popping up around here. Again, restaurants are the toughest ones to make because they have a history of failing.
So the bank is like, no, or
well,
you're
depends.
like, I don't know if this business is going to work. Like,
it depends on the deal. If they're looking to lease and they're a startup and, you know, they don't really have much history, it's like, you know, you got to have some experience, right? And if they're coming to one of the buildings I rep and they have no experience, and it's like, well, Mr. Landlord, what do you want to do here, right? Because if these guys come in, they don't make it, we just spent all this time and money, and the biggest thing is time, right?
Yeah.
We spent, you know, 6 months getting these guys up and running and they just failed.
now we got to do it again.
Yep. And now we're doing it all over again. And who knows what we could have missed if we kind of just thought a little bit more about this. And when we vet some folks is, you know, we look at our ROI. You know, if it's a small office, you know, 500 square feet or whatever, they're taking it as is on a 1 year deal. Risk reward, right? Well, we're not really doing a whole lot to the building. Owner's not putting money into it. Yeah, we're more than likely going to say yes to that deal. But if they're taking like 5,000 square feet, they want $100,000 in a TI package to help build up the space for what they want. All of a sudden, it's like, well, let's see your financials. Let's see your business plan. Like, how much experience do you have in this? Because
I think that part is something that a lot of people don't realize. Like, it's not like, hey, let me rent from you. It's like, okay, does your business make money and can you afford it? Because if you can't, like, we can't do this.
Yeah, and you know, the tough part is sometimes landlords will be sitting on a vacant space for a while and they're like, oh, I've got this guy that wants to lease it. And it's like, okay, yes, he wants to lease it, but let's look at the big picture here, right? Kind of going back to that helicopter with missing rotor. If he doesn't have the money now, who's to say he's going to have the money down the road, right? Is he going to pursue some bank financing? If so, well, that changes things. Well, now he's got some operating cash, right? But if he can't get qualified by the bank, do you really want to qualify him?
Yeah, this scenario is kind of like a more money, less problems when trying to get the real estate.
Exactly. But for those that, you know, don't have the money to do it, you know, again, it's kind of getting creative on financing. And right now we're seeing with interest rates high, more contract for deeds, right? Essentially contract for deed is like the owner is the bank, right? They have the first lien on the property. You're making payments to them instead of the bank, right? And that's a way that we've been able to get some creative financing done where instead of that 20 to 25 down, well, you only need about 10 or 15 down because the landlord or the seller is willing to do this. He's got the first lien of the property. If you default on it, well, he's going to get the property back and he's going to keep all the money you paid him, right? So that's where it gets into creative financing for folks that have less money, right? And right now with kind of the boomer generation, they own a lot of their property debt free and they're trying to sell. Well, if they sell now, they're going to pay up the wazoo in capital gains tax. Well, no one wants to pay the man more than what they have to, right? So the contract for deed option allows that to be kind of spread over time. So you're not taking a huge hit all at once. So again, creative financing that way to kind of help get the deal done and help a first-time investor get into a property.
And like having somebody with experience to do that, like those negotiation and like understanding the lease, it's so important. Yes, there's 3 different pillars within commercial real estate, but at some of these bigger firms, like they don't have the experience that you do, where you've kind of done it all, you do it all, you're building the relationships, they're thrown into these big deals and they're almost like a cog in the wheel, right?
Yeah, so kind of like those bigger brokers, right? I mean, a lot of them are working on bigger deals. I mean, they're selling skyscrapers, they're selling 100,000 square foot complexes. I mean, like the JLL and the Colliers guys, I mean, they've got just those contracts with bigger groups, right? Premier, we're a smaller company. We've kind of planted our flag in Anoka County. That's where we mainly operate. We can go anywhere, but that Anoka County is our backyard. We know a lot of the folks over there. This summer I hired an intern, had him cold call all summer. He's called probably 1,200 different buildings, getting a hold of owners. So, we're working the market hard, trying to find, making those connections.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about you guys is your marketing, which for a lot of commercial real estate companies, like there's not like, other than like the LoopNet and like the here's our sign in the yard, like these big firms aren't doing like social media stuff or like even billboards and stuff like that. I've seen you guys' brand in a lot of different places. Is that like coming from you, or is that from like, obviously you have a team, but like,
yeah, so that's kind of like a group,
the marketing,
a group thing, right? Okay. So we kind of all discuss like, what's the best way to market some of this stuff, right? And different buildings will market different ways, right? If it's retail, well, we'll heavily pump that out on emails and stuff to other brokers, or start cold calling other brokers that, specialize in only retail. Some brokers with Cushman & Wakefield will only do retail. Yeah. So if we've got a retail facility coming and we get it listed and all that, well, hey, I'm going to pump it out to these guys first because I know that they're working directly in the retail market. And so we kind of use our relationships, and then, small office, we pump that out on Facebook a lot. And that's how most of that gets eaten up. One of our greatest advertisers is putting a sign in the front of the building. Yeah. We get tons of people that call on just those signs, and that's one of the biggest ways that we market things too. And it's pretty effective.
Yeah. I mean, and it, for the management side of things too, like, having like density to like where the properties are, it makes your job more efficient, because it's similar to pest control, where when we're driving all over the place, we're spending time, but we're not necessarily making money. Yeah, right.
Exactly. You're just burning the rubber on the road. Yeah. So we try to keep everything that we manage within about 15 to 20 minutes of our office. If I'm spending greater than 30 minutes just driving there, well, okay, that's 30 minutes getting there. It's another 30 back plus traffic, right? Plus time on site. Well, on my 8-hour day, I already burned a lot of it sitting in traffic or driving for whatever the issue is on site. So really it comes down to us being effective, right? And that's why, I've turned down a lot of stuff this year for property management just because it's too far away. And when I talk to these owners, I'm like, unfortunately, it's just for me to be effective for you and like give you the quality of service I want, I got to be closer. Your building's just too far away. And, I do that because we've got a certain quality that we want to meet. We got the standard. But if I'm spending, an hour plus trying to get someone to a property, well, an hour is a huge amount of time, especially when there's an active casualty going on. If I've got a fire sprinkler line that's dumping water in a building. Yeah. Oh, great.
Cheese in the elevator.
Exactly. Right. The cheese in the elevator. Right. So, it's just about being close and being effective. And that's how we've kind of set ourselves up on the property management side. On the sales and leasing side, we go beyond that. Yep. And
because those are bigger revenue generators, right?
Yep. Well, a bigger revenue generator also, like, you're kind of dedicating that time to go out, meet with this person and do the showing, right? Because I know that when I'm going out there to do the showing, like, there's someone interested in this, right? And now I'm going to go out, put my salesman hat on and sell them on the building, the land, or whatever it is.
So right now, because you're building your team out, like, is the majority of your time spent like negotiating, like getting deals done or trying to get deals done?
So I'm about 70-30 right now. Okay. So 70% of my time I spend networking, sales, leasing, 30% property management. And, again, being owner of the company, the line stops here. If there's a complaint, all right, I'm going to take it. I'm going to own up to whatever the issue is that's going on with the building. If something got missed, hey, I will take the brunt of it, and we'll fix it. We'll figure out whatever the issue is and get it fixed. But again, I've hired on the property manager to help me, focus more on sales and leasing while he handles the property management side of things.
So as far as like the future for Premier, like what's the next 3 to 5 years looking like? Planning to scale, take more properties on? I know you're talking about getting some yourself.
Yeah. So for property management, we're really only looking at stuff that's within our Anoka County circle. But for myself, I'm trying to acquire my own properties. I want to build my own portfolio. And I kind of set myself in a way that my dad did. My dad had real estate. He was always there for us growing up. That was awesome. He's coming to my baseball games. He was my coach. He was my brother's coach. He was with my sister when she was going to taking horseback riding lessons. He was always around. It was awesome. I had a wonderful childhood. And I want to do the same thing for my family whenever I get to that point, right? But right now, I'm trying to find something that I think makes sense for me to buy, and kind of just saving up my money, actively looking for something that I want to buy, and just try to start growing my own portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the right business to do that. Like, so many people are like, yeah, I want to get into real estate, but they have no knowledge or information. So, and on the flip side, I know we do a lot of work with property managers and like leasing and brokers at some of those bigger companies. And there's so many of them that have this level of knowledge, but there's like no interest in doing it for themselves. And that to me is kind of mind boggling, honestly.
Yeah.
Just like long-term, like if you're in it, like logically, like if you're seeing people come in and invest into this and then they're making money and you're seeing all these numbers and like you'd still just want to like have a job. Oh, I don't get that.
I remember my first time like realizing it was looking at one of these properties. I'm cutting the dividend checks out for the owners, and I'm like, oh my gosh, these guys are the amount of money these guys are making. I'm like, oh my goodness, I've spent all year trying to make this kind of money, right? But this is their dividend check because their property is leased out, and they have no debt on it. So it's like, well, okay. All the owners are getting their cut of the cheese right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's like every deal's not like paying big dividends like that, right? And usually the first few years of stabilizing a property can be difficult and making sure it's profitable and cash flows and all that.
And the big thing is just making sure that you're paying down the debt service, because even though you own the building, you really don't. The bank owns it. So, then that's the one thing to kind of... Is
that the reason why you haven't like already bought a property yourself?
Well, the problem for me is I haven't been able to buy something yet because I've been slowly accumulating my dad's shares of the company. And so,
so you're investing into...
I've been investing in the company to kind of buy him out. And, I also just bought my own house over in Osseo. So when I got out of the Navy, I bought a duplex. So I've been living on one side, renting out the other. And, it's been a great asset for me. So now it's like, okay, I want to kind of set myself up in a different way now. So I'm going to lease out my side. Because I saw this house come on the market, and I was like, all right, so let's run the numbers on this. If I rent out my side for this, I know what my payment over here is going to be. Oh, well, pretty much covers it. So let's do this.
That's rich dad, poor dad stuff right there.
So I jumped on the house, I bought it, and I've got all moved out of mine. I've got a tenant moving in, and now his rent is going to essentially pay the mortgage at my house in Osseo now, which is a two-part thing, right? So it sets me up in Osseo, but then it also sets me up to liquidate the duplex should a property come up, because I want to be able to have my own house. I don't want to be a renter for someone else, right?
You're establishing the income for that property.
Correct. So now if I take the duplex to market, I feel pretty confident I get about 400 to 450 on it. And given that I don't have much debt left on it, I should be able to 1031 that into a large chunk of a down payment on another commercial site. So that's kind of been the other thing that's been kind of holding me back was, one, funds, and then two, like, what do I do where I'm living at now, right? So now that I'm out of my house, moved into the other one, my house is going to kind of sit there as a asset to liquidate should the right property come along that I want to buy.
That, and thinking about things that way it's such a deep level of understanding, and some people never think about assets and like leveling up like that, because it's hard. Like there's so much to think about there. And then you get the other side of it where people almost, they think they know everything and they're really just making TikToks.
Exactly. And, I mean, the one thing on the property management side is, we're really only as good as our vendors. So we really try to like align ourselves with quality vendors, like Abracadabra. Like you guys are doing the pest control at some of our buildings, and I can't tell you how great it's been. I mean, we had snakes out at one building, and Ike came out and took care of it. And I was like, oh, I hate snakes.
Yeah.
Like, just
he brought his little flute, and I'm just kidding.
He made them go away, right? I mean, we had this nasty nest of like gardener snakes, and they got in the building, and like snakes are my kryptonite. Like I just can't do it. And again, just shout out to you guys for having a guy that can come out right away and helped us take care of the issue, because no tenant wants snakes in the building. Like, what is this? Samuel Jackson snake on a plane? No.
Yeah. But like that. Well, and for those businesses, like something like that, like halts their business also, and it impacts their ability to make money. Like if that's a restaurant, I don't know the particular scenario. I'm glad we got it taken care of. Also, thanks for your business.
Yeah, no worries. Happy about it.
But like those type of unforeseen things, like the chaos that property management and vendors and like pest control, where it just like pops up, that stuff does impact a business. It's not just a thing.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. I mean, when you got mice in a building, or you have snakes in a building, or ants in a building, like, I mean, those things are all going to set you up for a big issue down the road. And part of what we do is, instead of taking a defensive approach to management, we are taking a more offensive approach, right? We're looking at preventative maintenance.
Proactive, yeah.
Right? Yeah, correct. Proactive would be the right word. And it's like, how do we prevent something from happening, right? Like, we're not going to be able to prevent everything. Like, you just can't. But what can we do to try to mitigate it, right? And looking at my budget, where can we allot to help this building, right? And again, pest control being one of them, right? If mice are getting in the building, they're chewing on the wires, squirrels are getting in, chewing up stuff. Yeah. It's a huge hazard.
The other part of it is it's such a tiny little dollar amount. So sometimes, like in some of the industrial portfolios that we've been working on, like they never even thought about how much time it took for them to handle these issues as they pop up, but they pop up very predictably and can like really be prevented. So they're taking this time away from like doing a deal or going to a showing, because you have to deal with a pest control vendor. Like you just lost out on a massive deal.
Oh, yes. How much time did I just lose, right? And, time is the most valuable thing you can get. So we try to set ourselves up on the management side to like work with the quality vendors that we know and trust and can help us when these issues come up. Because for liabilities, I can't go do anything, right? I can't go change a light bulb because if something happens, oh shoot, that's liability.
There's
right?
So many property managers that do like everything though.
Yep. And, I can't tell you how many times it's like, I feel like I could do this, but, I call a professional out and actually it's like, oh, well, hey, this is wired wrong. Oh, well, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I would have just, put the light bulb in or whatever it was and moved on with it. But, you get building owners who don't want to pay the worker, right? So they go do it themselves. And it's like, well, you didn't really do it right. So now instead of spending the $1, we're spending $5 to come back and fix it, right? So, and that's the one thing that we kind of voice with our landlords is.
And you could tell the properties where it's like managed like really, really well. Like we go into tons of commercial buildings, and like we can tell when there's like, these people are serious about this. It's not just some fly by night. I hope this is profitable at the end of the year type of building. It's like, no, this is ran and all the stuff's taken into account, because it's really just one big process, like a bunch of check boxes, right? So you guys do a fantastic job. I love that you're continuing to grow. I've learned even more about like the skill set that you have when it comes to education. I think you should like do more of that to just like put the information out there. Like if anybody should be a TikToker on real estate, like it actually should probably be you. Like, and if that's a good way to generate
that's a great idea.
Traffic. That's why I brought you here, is just for ideas, right?
Oh no, I appreciate it. I mean,
we can start recording now. I'm just kidding. So is there any issues or lessons learned, like as you were kind of going through that learning by doing process, that you can look back on and say, this failure or whatever has taught me this. And anytime these scenarios come up, like I remember.
Oh, yeah, great question. You know, there are plenty of times where it's like a lot of it comes down to communication, right? You know, and it's all about being transparent and very open, right? And sometimes you always got to make sure you follow up in writing, because someone might think that I thought we said this. Like, well, no, here's the email of what we discussed, right? Like, this is it. And so what I'll do is after I'm done chatting with someone is I'll follow up in an email, or if it's a phone call, and just say, hey, you know, we talked about the space, you know, you're thinking about doing it for $1,000 a month or 2,000 or whatever it is. Right. And, you know, I'll talk with the landlord and try to get this out. You know, keep in mind listed price is this, right? And because at the end of the day, it's the landlord who is going to decide what he's going to take a deal at and what the tenant's going to do, right? I mean, we're just the middleman in between here. But again, it's all about keeping that line of communication. And I can't tell you how many times that's saved my butt from like, well, you said this. Well, no, remember in our email, this is what we talked about, right? And then I guess I forgot about that. It's like, okay, well, this is what we discussed. So
and like, this is the contract, this is the lease. Like, these are all the things. And when there's 35 pages, like, you can, like, I feel like human instinct would be to just like, yeah, it's good. But like, you can't do that. That's like a legally binding thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that will just go and sign something blindly, and I'm like, hey, make sure you just read through it. Let me sleep easy at night knowing that you at least just you breeze through it or read it, right? Just because otherwise, if I see you just sign this down, I'm like,
yeah,
well, you know, I want to make sure you understand like what happened here. Like, what is the deal, right? And that's the biggest thing, is just making sure everyone's on the same page and managing expectations. And then the last part is just making sure they're talking to the right people, because zoning comes into effect so many times. And with the changes in fire code and everything else, it's like, all right, well, based on what you're telling me you want to do with the space, you need to talk to the fire marshal, because I know that these sprinkler heads here are, you know, hanging a little low. And that's because of what the previous use was, right? And what you're talking about kind of sounds like we need to raise those back up. And again, I don't want to speak on the code, but you need to talk to this person. And here's their contact info. Talk to them about this. And I'll always put an email so that way I kind of cover
here's the expert. Yep. Do this.
Cover your butt, right? So I'll say, here, talk to this person about this issue that I think you need to make sure to look at.
You better not be talking about the...
Oh, no. But again, just another example of something that I try to look out for as well, right? But do I catch everything? No. But again, I try to empower those people to talk to the people who know that, right? Like zoning. All right, here's the person at the city. Talk to them about your use, you know, because it's from what you're describing of what you want to do here, you might not fall within the code. So talk to this person. So I always put them in front of the right people to talk to.
So that's I got a couple more questions. We've gone a little over. I just want to put that out there, but we'll wrap it up here. So I've heard a few people who they think, I'll just use my buddy. He's a real estate agent. He'll help me get this building. How would you kind of lay out the differences between somebody that is experienced with real estate on the commercial side versus somebody that is really just residential, buys and sells homes?
Well, so the license for residential and commercial, it's the exact same license. It's just what you kind of specialize in. Now, on the residential side, you've got a lot of disclosures. It's, you know, completely different. Like, you're disclosing pretty much everything that's ever happened in this house. On the commercial side, it's different. You know, you're requesting the information. You are essentially billing a contract of what you're doing to buy it, right? And, you know, if you're using whoever you want, hey, that's all up to you. But the biggest thing I've run to and seen is some people don't read the leases. And if you don't read the leases and you don't write your purchase agreement in a way to request tenant improvement dollars that have been set per these lease deals to be escrowed, or the deposits, you know, I've seen some purchase agreements come where they're not requesting the deposits. It's like, well, if you don't request the deposit, like, technically I don't have to give it to you because part of our contract is a legal and binding deal that says I'm buying this from you, right? And it's like, well, you want to make sure you're doing the right due diligence and working with someone who's experienced, right? Because in commercial real estate, it's a lot of money coming into play. And, you know, I've seen it before where people have made a small mistake by not reading things, right? I mean, an attorney is going to be your best friend, right? They're costly, but you're paying them to also help out to look through your best interest, because as a real estate agent, I can't explain the law. I can't explain what this lease technically says. I've read it a lot. I know kind of what it means, but I can't legally tell you that. So I would say if you're going to use your friend to do it, have an attorney, a real estate attorney, look through all the documentation to make sure that you understand with what you're buying.
That's a lot of wisdom right there. So last question, this is the Homegrown Hustle. Thanks again for coming on. So one thing we ask all of our guests, Mike, is what does the word hustle mean to them? So what does hustle mean to you in your business?
I think that's a great question. Hustling is just working hard, right? Kind of prioritizing the tasks that need to be done and getting it done in a timely manner and getting back to those people that are waiting on you, right? Because you got businesses out there that are trying to figure out what they're doing. And, if you're not being proactive and, getting back to them, well, you're going to miss out on business. And so, hustle to me is, make sure you're getting back to people and being realistic about whatever it is that they want to do.
That's awesome. I love that, man. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you if they're looking to do business, social media, all that?
Check out our website, premiercommercialproperties.com, or you can give me a call, 763-486-8247. It's my cell phone. Give me a call. Happy to talk to any and everyone about real estate, leasing, property management.
Yeah, he's got a baby face, but it's more like the Benjamin Button scenario. He's got 33 years of credit already. You've been around the block and you know what you're doing. So obviously an expert in your space, growing your business, second generation commercial real estate. I don't see that a lot. I'm just a really impressive individual. I'm super grateful for you coming on here today, Mike. Thanks everybody else for listening to the Homegrown Hustle here. Please check out Mike's website if you're interested in real estate on the commercial side. This guy is a master educator, as you've heard through this story, and really just a good guy all around. So check him out. Check us out. Give us a like, thumbs up on all the social medias. We do have a TikTok. So you'll have a few TikToks after this, Mike. But
awesome.
Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again for joining us on Homegrown Hustle. Our local business community thrives because of the brilliant leaders right here in our backyard. And it's been an absolute privilege to provide them with a platform to share their invaluable expertise. Stay tuned for more insight, wisdom, and inspiration from our local business champions. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Together, we'll continue to nurture and expand our homegrown success stories. Matt Eichmann signing off until our next insightful episode.